So by now it's pretty well known Japanese text is faster than English text in KSS and many other games for that matter, but I was still interested in why exactly this was. For KSS specifically, I don't think the text was intentionally slowed down, since if you look at both versions frame by frame, they both load one character per frame. So in a way they load the text at the same speed. They load text in the same way. So the actual difference that makes Japanese be faster than English in this context would be the languages themselves, just how they work differently. So here's some sample text with the Japanese English fonts for KSS, which I have actually in-game screenshots up here, but I want to show it in a clearer context at first. You can see that the difference between Japanese text and the Latin alphabet would be that in Japanese, every character is about the same width, while in English, or like Latin, characters can have different widths, and some characters can be narrower than others. So for example, here's 5 characters, the same vowels in Latin up here, and in hiragana and katakana down here. And you can see that the same amount of characters takes up more space in Japanese. And in KSS specifically, most Latin characters are either the same width or narrower than the Japanese equivalents. The only character that actually is wider, like the only character in English KSS that's wider than the Japanese characters would be SW, which is why I put a bunch of them here. You can see that most, like counting the blank space, most characters in Japanese, they're 12 pixels wide, while a W would be 13. Because that's pretty much how it is within the game itself. English characters always have consistently 1 pixel between them, and Japanese characters are consistently 12 pixels wide. Kind of like, and they can have varying amounts of space between them. So here is an in-game example I have for that specifically, which is interesting because you can see here, specifically with the phrase okay, how that changes between English and Japanese. Since it's the same font, same letters, you can see in Japanese there's more space between them because they're still full width, because that's how the text works in Japanese. So that means that since besides W, there aren't any characters in English KSS that are wider than Japanese characters. On average, if a text box is just full of an average text, it's gonna take longer in English than it does in Japanese. So that's the most consistent way that Japanese gets an advantage over English in KSS. The other one comes down to translation itself, and it's not as clear, I would say. Because as you can see here, this is also the same text box in Japanese and English, and there's 2 sentences here. In English the first one is longer, but in Japanese the second one is longer. So that's not like the most concrete example, but pretty much what it shows is that things don't necessarily translate one-to-one. Like something that's short in one language can be longer in another. And also in both languages, text boxes don't have to be completely filled up. So while overall, like for the game, just by measuring text, you can see that Japanese is faster, theoretically a single text box that's completely filled up in Japanese and has some blank space left over in English could be faster in English. So this one, it's like, I was hesitant to include it because it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't clearly benefit English or Japanese, but I thought it was important to say because it does affect how fast the text box is. And that's pretty much it. Hope you found this interesting.